Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, our steps directed towards you. Amen.
Amen.
There is, interestingly enough, a theme that comes up again and again. I remember way, way long ago, I had a sermon on loneliness. But loneliness, though it has always been a part of humankind, has become an epidemic. Loneliness isn't determined by the actual number of friends or social contacts a person has. It's really what consists of meaningful contacts in persons you have, according to the experts. The argument is essentially, if you feel lonely, you are lonely. And guess what? The latest statistics show that 50% of Americans feel totally lonely in their lives. We are not the Britons are almost the same as us. A study just done in the UK found that 47% of people in the United Kingdom feel lonely, and most of those people found that the only companionship they have is a television. The Japanese study found that more than 1 million people, half a million people spent the last 6 months at home with absolutely no outside contact whatsoever. So when you hear people saying they're lonely, it's a big deal. It is a very, very big deal. It turns out Brigham Young did an interesting study, Brigham Young University, and it turns out that not only is loneliness a big deal, but it gets you sick. When we are lonely, evidently it triggers stress, and it triggers a hormone in us called cortisol, which is fine in small dosages. But if you remain lonely and consider yourself lonely, your body consistently builds up with cortisol in such a way it kills you. In fact, it found out if you are excessively lonely for a long period of time, you can shorten your life by 15 years because that amount of cortisol in you is worse than being obese or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Who knew? According to the latest studies, it showed that the social network of Americans between 1985 and 2009 shrunk by 1/3. The social network of what people can feel. The loneliest people in our country are the Z generation, people 18 to 35. Absolutely the loneliest. More people are now single, by the way, than at any time in the last 140 years. And by the way, since I'm surrounded by young people regularly, I'll tell you their schedules. There is no time really for having really quality time. You drive through traffic to get wherever you're going to go to school. And traffic, as you well know in Miami, is well, I'll give you an example. When I got married 20 years ago, 104th was then old. It is now ancient. The amount of cars on 104th has gone up 1,000%. The road is still the same. Welcome to Miami. Our infrastructure is literally from another century, an early other century, 1950s and 1960s. You go through that, you get to class, but you're not allowed to meet anybody in class because that's considered inappropriate. You can't ask, you can't do, you can't come up to somebody and say, can I go out with you? Well, that's not allowed. So a lot of times, by the way, the classes are designed, the professor doesn't even pay attention to you. That's good and bad. My students will tell you that can be good and bad. Because the CLAUS knows everything you're doing, which is fun, but he also calls you out in front of the whole class about it. So while you feel you're all part of this, you get nailed. But it's true. You go to class, getting there is a pain. You walk into class, professor usually doesn't know you. Your fellow classmates don't know you. I insist on my students having to say hello, turn around, say hello to each other, work in groups. But you can essentially drive back and forth through all this traffic, go to a class, 16 weeks and not know anybody when you went in, leave 16 weeks later, not know anybody else either, including the professor. And you can have several classes like that. When you go home to siblings, a lot of whom would you like to put in the microwave, according to my students. You're usually arguing at least with one parent, because that's what everybody does when they're in their late teens, early 20s, because you're now an adult, but your parents still think that you're living in their house, you're a kid. And then you go to work, where you're making basically minimum wage, and you're working with a lot of people who are unhappy. This is not a great way to live. And when do you have a chance to meet people? So I say to my students regularly, oh, by the way, have you ever run into that thing? If you're not working on Saturday, you're so tired on the weekend, you're too tired to go out. And everybody groans and says, how did you know? And I said, did you ever notice that then when the few times you do go out, you're feeling guilty because you've got papers to do, so you really can't enjoy going out? And the answer is, yeah, how did you know? I said, I wasn't born yesterday. It may look like it, but I wasn't born yesterday. It turns out that there's some other things we need to know about loneliness. First of all, it's important to remember that loneliness is not being alone. There's a big difference between being alone and lonely. An example of being lonely is, I remember when I first went to Union Theological Seminary, I didn't know anybody, and I decided to go over to Fifth Avenue, because I heard this was a famous place. I went Fifth Avenue, and I went through Times Square to get there, and I looked at all these people in Times Square. And then I got to Fifth Avenue. I looked at all these people. I thought, there must be several thousand people here. And I don't know anybody. I thought, isn't that weird? You can feel totally lonely, surrounded literally by an island of people. I never forgot that. I never forgot that. How you can be surrounded by people and feel totally like you're like this little tiny thing and you're not part of it at all. So it's not the same thing as being alone. Now, I don't know about any of you, but I get peopled out. And I find that at the end of the day, I don't want to see anybody. There's a part of me that most people don't realize. People are always surprised by this. I was never a party person. People think with my hyperactivity, I was like into parties when I was in college and stuff. I really didn't like going to parties because I didn't know anybody. And I preferred to be home doing something by myself. I really didn't like going to parties. I wasn't a bar person either, believe it or not. I didn't like going to bars with a bunch of guys doing whatever. I really wasn't. And to this day, I find it at the end of the day, I really don't want to see anybody. I really don't. I am done with people. I really am. I prefer to sit and read a goofy page turner of some type that has nothing to do with theology. I like really weird stuff. 19th century murder mysteries, some kind of science fiction, anything that's a page turner. Which, by the way, I might add, is not a good thing to read before you go to bed. My wife will sit and read spiritual things. And she will go to bed like this. I will read something that's absolutely insane, and I'll go to bed like this. But there are times when I get people that it's not the same as being lonely. There's lonely when you feel absolutely you feel unloved, you don't even love yourself. And there's the times when you just need solitude and quiet. I'm not talking about genuine solitude and quiet. I'm talking about those dark nights of the soul when we're really, really, really lonely. It is not cured, by the way. Social media does not cure loneliness. Social media is a mess. I'm trying to think of get the following example. You are feeling terribly alone. You flick on Facebook, for instance, and you see all these people frolicking at the beach, having a great time. And you're sitting there by yourself, looking at this in a room by yourself. People at Disney World, people at this, people at that, smiling, looking fabulous. And then you get other people always showing pictures of themselves in swimsuits, looking like they're models and this like this, and trying to show the best and everything else. And here you're not feeling modelish. You're not feeling beautiful. You're not feeling, this is what you say on social media. This is supposed to make you feel good. Social media does not cure loneliness. Being forced into social situations doesn't fix it either. Come on, let's go. You're going to go. You'll like this. So suddenly you're dragged to a thing where you're filled with people, none of whom you meet, and it turns out you're at some meeting of which you have no interest in whatsoever, and this is supposed to cheer you up. And then there's mixers. Mixers don't work either. Does anybody remember ever having to go to a mixer?
Yeah.
Was it a success?
No.
Was it a success? No. Was yours a success?
High school.
Did it work? No. I hate mixers. I absolutely hate mixers, and especially it's worse if you're a clergyman because somehow it gets out, oh, look, I know we're not supposed to talk about this now, but do you mind if I talk to you about something that's a problem? I mean, I really should make an appointment to come see you, but do you mind? Social media doesn't work to work with loneliness. Being forced into something doesn't work. Mixers don't work. I have read, by the way, if you go on social media today, there are all kinds of suggestions about what to do with loneliness. I am not an expert at all, but I have some suggestions that may be some helps somewhere along the way. Here we go. Number one, I think it helps to have a good conversation with yourself. Who knows you best? Yourself. By the way, one of my pet peeves with doctors is doctors that pay attention to who you are good doctors and healers. Doctors who don't even look at you and trying to figure out what's going on without listening to you or talking to you, I consider technicians. I don't like them to be around me. You need to have a good talk with yourself. Who are you? What is where you really are? And the only person that can really answer that is you. You know whether you are experiencing bouts of loneliness or whether you just are being alone. And you're the one who has to decide what that means. Now, you can ask others, you can ask somebody you trust what they think about where you are, but you've got to begin with a real legitimate conversation with yourself. This is not about egotism. This is not about being neurotic. This is having, you know yourself best. You know yourself best, and that's where you start. And if you know yourself best and you think you need another opinion, then you will tell that to yourself. Will you listen to yourself? That's the real clue. You need to talk to yourself and listen to where yourself is telling you you are. Number two, and I thought this was good, make a safe plan. If you're feeling lonely, you need to make a plan to do something about it. And it needs to be safe. That goes without saying. It needs to be safe. But you need to make a plan. Saying, well, I'm lonely, and then complaining about it, and isolating, and then being more lonely, making a plan means you can decide, I'm going to do something about it. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping anybody around you if you do nothing. You just make it worse. So make a plan. Make a safe plan. A safe plan can include what? Volunteering. There's got to be things you like. Are there a gazillion things in Miami-Dade County? In every county, there are a gazillion things you can do. By the way, there's a fascinating article in today's New York Times in the Sunday Review about why this woman moved back to a dying rural county. And she said you would be amazed at the number of things there are to do. She said these rural counties are not filled with kinds of people that you think. A very small group in a very small church has now started a discussion on LGBTQ rights, talking about racism in our country, in our own county, talking about, she gave a list of this stuff, and she said, this is in a very rural county. People here are not dumb. They know what's going on. How could you not? She said, a rural county has a lot of things to offer. So no matter where you are, there are things to do. Volunteer. Find something that speaks to you. Find things that speak to you. Churches are not bad either. Places where you are honored and respected for who and what you are. Laurie Heim had this sign here, and I don't know if this is going to be picked up on this thing or not, but it says, welcome all sizes. Good, I like that. All colors, all cultures, all sexes, all beliefs, all religions, all ages, all types, all people. That is the kind of place you want to go to. That's the kind of place that wants to affirm who you are and let you know that on any given day, no matter where you're feeling alone or lonely, you're here. You're welcome. There's no hidden agenda. That is the agenda. Get out. There are safe places to do it. Number 4, be kind to yourself. When you decide to make a plan, did you ever notice your own worst critic is you? Have you ever noticed that? Nobody gets madder at yourself than you get mad at yourself. Have you ever noticed that? All right then. So you go volunteer things. You start doing some things, and things don't change overnight. Be kind to yourself. You've decided, okay, I'm tired of being lonely. I'm going to do something about it. Does it happen overnight? No, once you start getting out and getting to meet people, joining things and volunteering into things, it takes time for people to know you. It takes time for you to feel safe in a safe place and comfortable. Be kind to yourself. Will everybody like you? No. So what? That's the way it is. As my wife always says, that's the reality. It's the way it is. So what? Just because you belong to X, you're going to X, and one or two people don't like you, that's their problem. You're here, you're meeting new people, you've got a plan, and it's working. But be nice to yourself. Be kind to yourself. It's not going to happen overnight. Balance. I hate that. There's this whole thing when we teach world religions about balance. It starts in the East. Balance is extraordinarily annoying because most of us have a hard time finding it. Do you ever find some days you wake up and everything falls into place? And how wonderful and how good it is. I mean, you feel good from the top to the bottom. Oh, you just feel good. The next day you wake up, and as soon as you wake up, it goes south. And you want to know how one day can be so good and the next day be so bad. Everything gets out of balance, and this is a constant thing about how do we do too much this, too little of that balance. It's okay to balance a sense of being alone to working on a sense of loneliness. When you're working on loneliness, it doesn't mean you have to be out all over the place. Remember, being alone is good. How do we find a balance between enjoying being alone and working on getting out and getting ourselves to meet others? Because that's good too. How do you find a balance? Number 6, what about your faith? If you believe in something, why haven't you let that help you? Now, there's this very old corny thing, and it bothers me because it really does speak well. And I always used to make fun of it, but I really don't so much anymore. There's this famous thing called footsteps, and this person is complaining about why weren't you with me? Why didn't you walk with me? And the response that Jesus said, the footsteps were mine. I was carrying you. I was carrying you. Well, why don't you let your faith carry you? I say that to me too. David talked to us today about when I was getting my transplant. It was a very, very lonely time. One of the things I never shared with anybody here is when they did the transplant, they had no rooms. They put me in pediatric intensive care. Just having come out of a transplant, I was put in pediatric intensive care where most of the babies didn't make it. And the nurses that were for the heart transplant were on another area of the hospital. And the pediatric nurses didn't know what to do with me. They couldn't do anything. And you want to talk about lone and lonely. And so I'm asking, did you let your faith carry you? And sometimes we don't let our faith carry us because we're too stubborn, because that's what we are as human beings. So I just ask that to remind us, do we let our faith carry us? And finally, I was interesting. I read experts about this, and I disagree with the experts. Get a pet. Never underestimate the value of a good hound. All right, a cat. Cats. A good hound is a love and a joy. They will be. Who here has dogs? You have a dog. You have a dog. You have a dog. You have a dog. I rest my case. When I first got sick, the cardiologist said to me, "Do you have a dog?" I said, "Well, I have got a dog and a cat." Somebody seemed to have a cat. He said they bookended me, and they will not let me up until one's on one side. This is before I had the transplant. He said, "You'll know when you are better when the animals." They'll know you're better before I am. They'll start the routine, and sure enough, if you remember the Deacon and the Whiz. Remember the Whiz, the three-legged? Yes, yes. And your hounds You'll get a sermon on this too. There's a whole new thing about, they used to say if you had dogs and you would imprint your emotions on them and you read into them human emotions. They said that the scientists were all wrong for saying that. Anybody here has a dog will tell you dogs have feelings. They know stuff. They know stuff. And they'll give you the look too when they know stuff. And yes, they will look when they've done something bad because they know they've done something bad, but they also know when you've done something bad, and they'll give you the look. Dachshunds are infamous for that. They give you the look. Other dogs will give you, I saw that picture of yours from the beginning of the week, they give you a look. They will give you a look, and when you are lonely, who is the one person who will come over and put a snout on you and sit next to you and get you to cheer up and nudge you a bit and try to get you out? Get a dog. If you must, a cat. All right, the cat. I don't get cats, but cats work for people. The idea is, you've said me, probably now this is going to be on the thing, I'll be cursed with this forever. But you can always trust a good hound. Can you always trust that many people? And a good hound. And there's nothing wrong with that. The experts were saying, well, if you have, some of these people had to rely upon hounds when they were lonely. And what is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? My next door neighbor is 77 years old, is a cancer survivor. She has a dog that she got because she was alone. Her son lives far away. She's divorced. And she walks that dog 5 times a day. She gets out, and in walking the dog, she meets people. She drives them nuts. They drive her nuts, but she meets people. And she gets out. And you're going to find people that have dogs get out, they walk, they get to know people. And so there are a million things to do. So if we're lonely, let's talk to ourselves. Find out who we are. Be honest with ourselves. If we don't trust our own opinion, ask somebody for help that we trust. Make a plan. Make a plan. Get on with it. Make a plan. Volunteer. Find things that you like. You all like things. We like things. Be kind to yourself. When you start something new, it's not going to fall into place immediately. Be good to yourself. Don't get mad. Don't get impatient. Realize we need a balance, too, between being alone. It's typical of us. We suddenly don't want to be alone. So what do? We get into everything. Then we get exhausted. Then we're back home alone again. So to try to find a balance, has our faith carried us? Have we let our faith, whatever it may be, have we let it carry us? And remember, a good hound may be God's antidote right in front of us. Let us pray. For the poor and the unfortunate, the sick and the suffering, the tempted and bereaved, the forgotten and lonely. For those known and unknown to us, we offer our prayers and meditation.